YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. For you here this morning, in the description of the video for your convenience. Of mishtalk.com, and it says, Discover UK may walk away with no deal. The EU now faces the shocking discovery is not Greece. The EU does not hold all the cards, and the UK is able and willing away from ever-escalating EU demands. UK threatens to quit Brexit talks if it faces massive bill. Will quit Brexit talks unless it drops its demands of a divorce payment of 100 billion euros, 12 billion American dollars, Brexit Secretary David Davis said. Negotiations on leaving the EU would otherwise be plunged into chaos, and £1 billion settlement, Davis said in an interview published in the Sunday Times. The size of Britain's exit bill, types of negotiations can begin before it has been agreed, has been a source of debate for weeks. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker has said the UK will have to pay about £50 billion, while Luxembourg's Prime Minister Xavier Bettel has signaled a figure between 40 billion euros and 60 billion euros. It's estimated the cost could balloon to 100 billion euros. By the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales put the cost at as little as £5 billion, which is 6.5 billion American dollars. To just look like we can walk away, we need to be able to walk away, Davis said. Under the circumstances, if that was necessary, in a position to do it. Reports Brexit talks could collapse. Bill, says EU negotiator. Brexit negotiator Michael Berner, refusal of member states to soften their demands over the size of Britain's divorce bill could lead to a collapse in talks and the UK crashing out without a deal. Minutes of a meeting, Commission revealed. Berner has told the Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and other senior officials that the stakes are so high, Berlin and Paris are refusing to pay more departure, while those governments who receive the most are opposed to any cuts in spending. Mr. Berner issue would doubtless be one of the most difficult in the negotiation, the minutes of a top-level meeting held earlier this month note. However, should there be no agreement on this point, he believed that the risk of failing to reach an agreement on the orderly withdrawal of the United Kingdom would become real. 7 member states wish to contribute more to the current multi-annual financial framework, less in projects financed under the framework. As positions have hardened on the with estimates of the bill now reaching as much as billion euros, Juncker noted that Theresa May appeared to be softening up the British public for failure deal. EU is shocked. A stance on Brexit. Gosh, I must be hungry. Euro intelligence confirms long ago the UK is able and willing to walk away. The UK is not Greece. The EU is. Try that again. The EU nannycrats still out. By email from Euro intelligence, it says EU is shocked by the UK's stance on Brexit. We have argued for some time that the main risk process is a source of cognitive dissonance on the part of the EU, which has a long history of misjudging UK politics. Mish comment, actually, Euro intelligence has repeated numerous times it expects a deal. The above story has a wonderful story about a memo detailing a commission meeting that includes an exchange between Michael Berner and Jean-Claude Juncker. He detected a growing by the UK to pull out without a deal, something they both seem to have discounted before. And Berner makes another important point. The reason why the Brexit bill has become such a serious issue is related to internal EU politics. Germany and France are steadfastly refusing to put any new money into the EU's budget, while the net recipient member states will not accept lower disbursements. The bill has been ratcheted up. Commenting on the Guardian article, Euro intelligence continued, saying, very revealing. People laughed at Theresa May's Brexit means Brexit pledge. Later, it was an accurate alibi, complete or incomplete pledge for the better no deal than a bad deal pledge. And the EU is right to factor this into their own negotiating stance. There is a history of misjudgment. The EU did not see the Brexit referendum coming. It did not factor in any probability of a leave vote. Many bought into the Brexit hopes, only to find out that British politics is not going to make that happen. And now they are surprised that the UK is willing to pull the plug on Article 50 agreement. See a pattern here. The EU is now finding out that the Brexit negotiations are going to be different in 2015. Then took the view, correctly as it turned out, that Alexis would not have the stamina to pull the plug. The UK government is better prepared for Brexit. It's not doing much else these days. It has a few other issues to deal with, and because it has concluded that the Brexit is the only tool it has to equalize the negotiating position. Deal or no deal? Euro intelligence is discovering that its repeated expectation for the deal may vanish into smoke. As I said all along, the deal is only possible if the UK shows a willingness to walk away and does so immediately. That phase now. The second problem is 26 nations all have to agree to the terms. We are at this point. The UK is finally willing to tell the EU to go to hell. We are not at the point 26 EU nations understand the implications. Finally, if and when 26 nations do grasp reality, desire to punish the UK overrule common sense. Mission Impossible says, I am not, deal is impossible, but if there is a deal, the EU will have to give a lot, and 26 members will have to approve it. The irony of the setup, the UK is, and the more forcibly it stresses willingness to walk away, the more likely a deal takes place. It will be the EU, not the UK, that backs down from the most demands. As I have stated all along, the EU does not have the upper hand. The UK can shut off corporate taxes, pay zero for a divorce fee, and stop all payments of any kind to the EU. Rule automatically, try that again. Should WTO rules automatically apply, the EU will get hit much harder than the UK exporters. Standpoint, the only thing the EU can do is make enough demand such as that the UK walks. Of power, it was very good, poor negotiating tactic. It does walk. It will be much harder on the EU and than the UK. Ballyhooed art of the deal and preposterous demands that cannot be accepted. Goal. Breitbart says from Cairo to Riyadh, action on terror where Obama offered apologism. Upon first inspection that President Trump's speech to Arab leaders in Riyadh today, a shift from President Obama's infamous fawned over lecture in Cairo, and those critics are incorrect because they'll tend to be journalists, activists, think tankers, politicians, or pundits. In other words, no business people. Trump gave in Riyadh was different because of his business acumen. Concludes a meeting without the clinched action points. Otherwise, the whole thing is a waste of time. We can easily find similarities in both their speeches: the usual diplomatic gratitude towards their host, the pledges not to lecture, the of the region's history, and the aversion describing Western versus Middle Eastern philosophies as a clash of civilizations. Where Obama stopped short, Trump lead into making demands of the people in the room. The intros. Obama opened with, I can't even pronounce this, as Lamabal Akalam or something to that nature, going on to apologize for the colonialism, proxy wars, hostility to Islam, and quoting the Holy Quran, civilization's debt to Islam, his responsibility to defend the Muslim faith, the hijab. Islam is a part of America. After this submissive introduction, 7 pages of his speech, brown-nosing his audience, he noted that violent extremists need to be confronted, closing with Islam is not part of the problem. President Trump dived right in, spending less than a page on flattery, and there was scarcely any in that section anyway, getting to the first action point by page 2 of his speech. It includes the announcement of $110 billion Saudi-funded defense purchase. If America is going to deal with the Arab world under a Trump presidency, at least going to get something out of it: cash, jobs, and importantly, leverage. Wait, you thought that was all? The very next sentence announced the Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology. Let's be clear, do nothing and likely achieve nothing. By this, or try that again, but by this point in Obama's speech, he was quoting Quranic Surah 9:19, which he claimed said, "Be conscious of God and speak always the truth." In reality, that passage demands the reader be faithful, and just a few verses later explains why. Oh, you who have believed, fight those adjacent to you of the disbelievers and let them find you in, and know that Allah is just. While President Obama lectured from the Quran, President Trump was declaring today, "We are not here to lecture. We are here to tell," or try that again. We are not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, who to be, or how to worship. Instead, we are here to offer partnership based on shared interests and values to pursue a better all. Defending Muslims from radical Islam. President Obama and Trump of how Muslims are the primary target of violent extremism, but Obama's defense of Muslims came more in the way of following than anything else. Freedom in America is the freedom to practice one's religion. That is why there is a mosque in every state of our union and over 1,200 mosques within our borders. That's why the United States government has gone to court to protect the rights of women and girls to wear the hijab and those who would deny it. Later on, he mentions how extremists have killed people of different faiths more than any other. They have killed Muslims. It was far more robust and far undoubtedly to the chagrin of liberal commentators, spirited in his defense of young Muslims who are having their minds poisoned and futures ruined. Effective argument against Islamic extremism, and President Trump put it simply and effectively as follows: young Muslim boys and girls should be able to grow up free from fear, safe from violence, of hatred, and young Muslim men and women should have a chance to build a new era of prosperity for themselves and their peoples. No apology, compliant hijabs, or no caveats, no compromises. And he goes on, says in sheer numbers, the deadliest toll has been on the innocent people of Arab, Muslim, and Middle Eastern nations, borne the brunt and the worst of the destruction in violence. Hold that more than 95% of the victims of terrorism Muslim. In this section was, again, to quote the Quran, this time the contentious Shura al-Madah, deployed by Islamist organizations themselves when seeking to defend against allegations of radicalism or terror links, saying the Holy Quran, whoever kills is as if he has killed all mankind. The Quran also says whoever saves a person, it is as if he has saved all mankind, except it doesn't. Paraphrasing actually reads, creed upon the children of Israel that whoever kills a soul, unless for a soul, corruption done in the land, he had slain mankind entirely, and whoever saves one, it is as if he had saved mankind entirely. Corruption in context is opposition to the spread of Islam, mockery, or even disbelief. Paragraph of the Quran reads, indeed, penalty for those who wage war against Allah and his messenger and strive upon the earth to cause corruption is that they be killed or crucified, or that their hands and feet be cut off from, or that they be exiled from the land. For them a disgrace in this world, and for them in the hereafter. Iran, perhaps the difference between President Obama's speech and that of President Trump's Iran. Obama, with doe-eyed naivety, began with another acknowledgement of American guilt, saying, in the middle of the Cold War, the United States played a role in the overthrow of a democratically elected Iranian government. Revolution, Iran has played a role in the acts of hostage-taking and violence against U.S. troops and civilians. This history is well known. And then he went on to say, I understand those who protest that some countries have weapons that others do not. No single nation should pick and choose which nuclear weapons, and that's why I strongly reaffirmed America seek a world in which nuclear weapons, including Iran, to access peaceful nuclear power if it complies under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now know endangered the wider world, with Iran pursuing nuclear weapons and emboldening terror-supporting regimes and their allies saying, without this speech, without this line in the speech, even Kim Jong-un would be singing a different tune today. Appears to right that historical wrong, stating today his wish to isolate the nation from the civilized world, again an action point. Lebanon to Iraq to Yemen, Iran funds arms and militias and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos. For decades, Iran has fueled the fires of sectarian conflict and terror. It is a government that speaks openly of mass murder, vowing the destruction to America and ruin for many leaders and nations in this room. Iran's most tragic and destabilizing interventions have been in Syria, bolstered by Iran. Assad has committed unspeakable crimes, and the United States has taken firm action in response and chemical weapons by the Assad regime. Tomahawk missiles at the Syrian airbase from where that murderous attack originated. Must work together to end the crisis in Syria, eradicate ISIS, and restore stability to the region. The Iranian regime's longest suffering victims are its own people. Rich history and culture, but the people of Iran have endured hardship and despair under their leaders' reckless pursuit of conflict and terror. The Iranian regime is willing to be a partner for peace. All nations of conscience together to isolate Iran, deny it funding for terrorism, and when the Iranian people have the just and righteous government they deserve, lack thereof. Where Obama declared Islam has a proud history of tolerance, prepared their latest homosexuals to be thrown from a building, a woman to be stoned in the street, President Trump demanded he condemned for the barbaric acts found its crescendo when he declared, "This is a battle between God and evil," insisting that Arab and Muslim leaders, forces of terror and extremism, ranks. A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and extremists, drive them out of your places of worship, drive them out of your communities, drive them out of your holy land, and drive them out of this earth. President Obama's section on tolerance, specifically with regards to women's rights and economic opportunity. President Obama told the Cairo audience, "I know that for many, the face of globalization is contradictory. The internet and television can bring knowledge and information, but also sexuality and mindless violence into the home. Such socially conservative statements more readily expected from Vice President Mike Pence. Neither at the time nor now seemed to pick up on it. Obama's own tolerance for conservative values apply in the Muslim world, not at home." President Trump used the word terror in some way, terror, terrorism, terrorists, a whopping 31 times in his speech in Rudda. Obama used the word even more whopping 0 times. 9/11 as an enormous trauma rather than a terrorist atrocity, opting to deploy the 11 times in his speech. Trump also used 9 times. As Obama lacked policy goals or anything of substance when it came to tackling. President Trump, on the other hand, announced the formulation of the terrorist financing targeting centers, insisting Muslim nations must be willing to burden if we are going to defeat terrorism and send its wicked to oblivion. Oh yeah, and President Trump said Islamic terrorism. Just conclusion, presidents concluded their speeches is proof enough of how differently the two men approach the issues of Islam, terrorism, and the U.S. relationship with the Middle East. Um, Melena strut around Raja in designer clothes, and the current president refuses to bow before Obama to remain prostrate before in action as words. In Cairo, he concluded with the quotes from the Quran first and then the Bible. His Quranic verse, "O mankind, we have created you male and female," support from TQI brigade of the liberal left today. He closed, "Thank you, and may God peace be upon you." Thank you very much. President Trump's conclusion, in addition to being more traditional, was and effectively called for a much-needed Islamic reformation. Civilization is waiting to begin a new renaissance. Just imagine what tomorrow could bring. Glorious wonders of science, art, medicine, and commerce to inspire humankind. Great cities built on the ruins of shattered towns. New jobs and industries that will lift up millions of people. Parents who no longer worry for their children. Families who no longer mourn for their loved ones. And the faithful without fear. These are the blessings of prosperity and peace. These are the desires that burn within a righteous flame in every human heart. And these are the just demands of our beloved peoples. I ask you to join me to work together and to fight together, because united we will not fail. Thank you. God bless you. God bless your countries, and God bless the United States of America. Final words to him. Well, I have off of Breitbart. As soon as the hamster decides to get it up here, taking a nap. That'll help him. Get the cattle prod. And here we go. Blackstone, Saudi Arabia announces $40 billion investment in the U.S. infrastructure. Scroll up and see what's going on. Here we go. He's coming up with it now. From Blackstone Group, in partnership with Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth, announced that they would commit $40 billion to invest in infrastructure projects mainly in the U.S. Blackstone, co-funded by Trump supporter Stephen Schwartz, a non-binding agreement with Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund to move forward with this initiative, The Hill reported. Arabia's PIF put down $20 billion for the project. Money would come from outside investors. Although Blackstone says the fund has been negotiated between the firms for the past year, the partnership is non-binding, which means that there is not a formal structure for the fund yet. Still discussing certain aspects of the reported. Blackstone and the PIF confidence. He scrolled it up a little fast for me here. PIF each gave a vote of confidence to the new partnership. This potential investment reflects views around the ambitious infrastructure initiatives being undertaken in the United States, as announced by President Trump. PIF Managing Director Ramian. This will create well-paying American jobs and for stronger long-term economic growth, Blackstone and James said. The partnership between the U.S. and Saudi Arabian companies comes as President Trump is visiting Saudi Arabia as the initial stop of his first trip abroad as president. Signed a series of agreements with a Saudi King Salman, solidifying their military and economic partnerships full day in the country. Is off of BizPac Review. And it says, America is back. Trump has the courage to confront Muslim leaders about terror in home run speech. President Sunday before the leaders of 50 Muslim countries on terrorism and challenges the Middle East faces. And Trump put the responsibility of stopping radical Islam. Muslim majority countries must take the lead in combating radicalization, said the president, while praising King Salman bin Abdulaziz, I may have butchered that, for his powerful leadership. Trump struck a noticeable contrast with his predecessor, former President Barack Obama, in the speech from Riyadh on Saudi Arabia. We're not here to lecture, he insisted. We're not here to tell other people how to live. The president said the U.S. was there to offer partnership based on shared interests, and that they must all be united in pursuing the one goal that transcends every other consideration. That goal is to meet history's great test to conquer extremism. Standing in the lion's den, Trump insisted that there can be no coexistence with Islamic terrorism, saying this is a battle between good and evil. Every time a terrorist murders an innocent person and falsely invokes the name of God, it should be an insult to every person of faith, he told the room. Worship God, they worship death. The president said America is prepared to stand with the nations of the Middle East in the battle terrorism, but he put the onus squarely on their shoulders. Has spread all across the world, but the path to peace begins right here on this ancient soil land, Trump said. The nations of the Middle East cannot wait for American powers to crush this enemy for them, he added. The nations of the Middle East will have to decide what kind of future they want for themselves, for their countries, and for their children. Countries must take the lead in combating radicalization. And he was clear on what the consequences are should the world fail. And in the uniform condemnation of this killing, then not only will we be judged by our people, not only will we be judged by history, but we will be judged by God, Trump said. Trump did not let Iran off the hook in his remarks, saying for decades Iran has fed the flames of sectarian conflict and terror. Based on the reactions from supporters on social media, the speech Trump's best to date. And there's a sampling of the responses from Twitter. I'll pick as I'm disappointed Fox isn't having some thoughtful analysis of it. They are back to giving airtime to faux White House scandals. Another one just says amazing speech, and I mean the list goes on if you want to take a look at them. Article that I have for you is off of oilandgaspeople.com. Leak shuts Brent Charlie North Sea platform. A gas leak has led to a North Sea oil platform being shut down. The gas detection alarm was set off on Friday morning on a platform, causing all non-essential workers to be evacuated. There were 176 people on the platform at the time, with 31 being evacuated. There are no reported injuries. Production has been ceased while an investigation is underway. A Shell spokeswoman said following a gas detection alarm, production was shut down and the platform called to muster. The source of the leak has been safely detected and isolated, and a full investigation into the cause will be completed. All 176 personnel on board have been accounted for, and a precautionary partial downman of 31 non-essential personnel is underway. Relevant authorities have been informed. The next article is off of Natural News. Silly Americans mock Venezuela's 99.5% currency collapse thinking it can't happen here. Yet another real-life attempt at creating a successful Marxist government is going down in flames, this time in Venezuela, harming millions of people in the process, even as the far-left government of President Nicolas Maduro doubles, triples, and quadruples down on the same failed fiscal policies. To say that the country is an economic basket case is a gross understatement. Inflation can only be described as runaway. The country's currency isn't even worth the paper it's printed on. Even basic foodstuffs and supplies, and the government is broke. Store shelves are empty. There is fighting in the streets. Murder rate is soaring. Large shipments of goods. As reported by Zero Hedge, the anger has gotten so bad over conditions in what used to be South America's economic behemoth. Demonstrators are resorting to throwing bombs full of feces at government forces as the currency, the bolivar, collapses, again by 99.5%. 5,100 bolivars to every dollar. The monetary depreciation and inflation are so extreme that most people's savings have been obliterated. It's all but impossible to buy imported goods, and domestic production of goods has also fallen dramatically. Like all good socialists, Maduro, who is essentially a dictator, has arbitrarily raised the minimum wage something like 20 times during his tenure, much like Democrats in the U.S. want to do and have done. But because artificially raising wages without taking into consideration whether businesses can even afford to pay them is a receipt for fiscal disaster. They have done no good and still only amount to about $40 a month. In fact, raising the wages by dictate rather than allowing the free market to determine wages has only made things worse. Hence the feces bombs, which, as El Pas reports, some have dubbed Pupyatov cocktails on social media. Fast becoming weapon of choice to hurl at government forces, demonstrators launch them with giant slingshots called crapapult. You can't make this stuff up. And yet, they are part of the political reality in Venezuela today. Socialism has taken the extreme as directly responsible for the destruction of this once proud, once prosperous country. These kids live in a dictatorship. They have no other option but to protest however they see fit. Maria Montilla, age 49, staged a behind the lines, or try this again, staged behind the lines of a group of protesters, told El País. There's nothing explosive here. It's our way of saying it should be our way. It's our way of saying, get lost, Maduro, you're useless, one protester who requested anonymity added. Miguel Torres, the one-time spy chief for Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez, has broken with the current government. He sees major trouble ahead, even civil war, if nothing changes, and the already massive protests spread even further to the poorer, generally pro-Chavez countryside. What is happening may be the starting point for huge armed confrontation between Venezuelans, he told Rutgers. Nobody wants that. Unfortunately, far too many Americans living in deep blue states and who were enamored with the presidential candidacy of socialist U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, would favor exactly the kind of government that's destroying Venezuela and has left other countries like Cuba, Bolivia, Ecuador, and others in desperate poverty. If that form of government ever takes hold, it would not only be economic disaster for the world, since the US dollar is the globe's reserve currency, it would doom generations of Americans to the same hopeless and endless cycles of poverty and desperation being seen now in Venezuela and other socialist governments. Anyone who seriously believes that America's currency would not undergo a catastrophic, deadly collapse under socialist government is no serious student of history. The evidence proving otherwise abounds. The next article is off of Zero Hedge. And it says a quarter of American adults can't pay all their monthly bills. 44% have less than $400 in cash. There was some good news and some not so good news in the Fed's latest annual report on economic well-being of U.S. households. First, the good news. The report, based on the board's fourth annual survey, Household Economics and Decision Making, conducted in October of 2016, presents a picture of improving financial well-being among Americans, at least according to the report. Overall, 70% of the more than 6,600 respondents said they were either living comfortably or doing okay, up 1% from 2015 and up 8% from the first survey results in 2013. Not surprisingly, the highest percentage, or 92% of those who responded, said they were living comfortably, was among the group with more than $100,000 in family income. For Americans making less than $40,000, the breakdown was almost evenly split, with 49% saying they were just getting by. Same study, 28% of respondents said that their income in the last 12 months was less than $25,000, and 40% their income was less than the key $40,000 cutoff, which suggests that roughly 4 in 10 Americans are finding it difficult to get by. In this one, if you want to pull it up, take a look at their charts and the figures and things that they have on them. The improvements in well-being, as reported by the survey respondents, were concentrated among high-income adults with at least some college education, and prompted the WSJ to write that U.S. household financial health improved in recent years. Even so, most of the changes reported in the survey were relatively modest, reflecting a slowly improving economy. Unemployment level 5% throughout 2016. Now, the not so good news. Nearly 8 years into the economic recovery, nearly half of Americans didn't have enough cash to cover a $400 emergency. Specifically, the survey found that, in line with what the Fed had disclosed in previous years, 44% of respondents said they wouldn't be able to cover an unexpected $400 expense like a car repair or medical bill, or would have to borrow money or sell something to meet it. This statistic remains. The overall share of adults who would struggle to come up with $400 in a pinch has declined by 2% from the last survey conducted in 2015 and down 6% since 2013. Could not pay in cash, 45% said they were in debt and used credit card to pay off the expense over time, while a quarter would borrow from friends or family, and another 27% said they couldn't pay the expense. To selling items or using a payday loan. The breakdown was largely attainment. 79% of those with at least a bachelor's degree said they would still be able to pay bills if hit with a $400 charge. Just 52% of those with no more than a high school diploma said the same. Is concerning were other findings from the study. Just under 1/4 of adults, or 23%, are not able to pay all of their current monthly bills, while 25% reported skipping medical treatments due to cost in the prior year. Additionally, 28% of adults who haven't retired yet reported to be retired, indicating they have no retirement savings or pension whatsoever. Out-of-pocket cost for an unexpected major medical expense was $1,000, and 42% of those with such an expense in the past year either had debt relating to that expense or unpaid balances. The Fed reported that 24 million adults are in debt from medical expense incurred over the previous year. Respondents went without some type of care, dental care in particular, because they could not afford it. Though the 25% who reported such a situation, 27% in 2015. Commenting on the report's concerning findings, Federal Governor Clinton supporter Laurel Brainerd, I guess it is, Laurel Brainerd, said that the survey findings remind us that many American households are struggling financially, including fully 40% of those with a high school diploma or less. 40% of all respondents could not cover an unexpected $400 emergency expense on borrowing or selling something to do so. The survey also shows that many adults have no saving for retirement. The finding also underscore themes apparent during the presidential election, namely the growing gap between the elites and the broader population. Of whites with bachelor's degree or more, 85% said they're doing okay or living comfortably. 2% for whites and or try that again, compared with 62% for whites with a high school diploma or less. They have similar but narrower gaps in response to that question when sorted by education. The biggest differentiator appears to be education. Fed reported that 82% of adults with a bachelor's degree or more in education said last year they were living comfortably or doing okay, up from 80%, as well as 69% of those with some college or associate degree, up from 66%. 79% of those with a bachelor's degree said they would still be able to pay all of their other bills in full if hit with a $400 charge. Just 52% of those with no more than a high school diploma said the same. Americans' sense of economic health also varied among racial and ethnic groups. Of the respondents with no more than a high school diploma, greater portion of non-Hispanic whites, 20.5%, reported being worse off than a year before. Non-Hispanic at 18.6%, or Hispanics at 20.2%. By WSJ on the latest annual study, Jonathan Mordich, a New York University professor of public policy and an economist, everybody on the low end feels like they're in a different situation, almost like they're in a different America than those with a bachelor's or more. The combination of instability and liquidity are really hurting at the low end, he added. That's the same end that had such an outsized impact on the latest presidential election. So based on the latest set of Fed results presented above, the solution to America's wealth problem would be to force every American into college education. Well, sure, let's just make it debt-free, because as even the New York Fed's Bill Dudley admitted in early April, student debt are a headwind to economic activity, noting that rising student loan debt in the United States could ultimately hurt overall and erode colleges and universities' ability to elevate lower income students. There are potential long-term negative implications of student debt and other types of consumer spending, Dudley said. Continued increases in college costs and debt burdens could inhibit higher education's ability to serve as an important engine of upward income mobility. And these developments are an important increased attention. It's understandable. $1.44 trillion in student loans outstanding as of March 31st, surpassing even $1.1 trillion auto loans. Here are the disturbing findings from the latest New York Fed study on America's student debt crisis. Our analysis shows that for any given level of education attainment, those with student debt are less likely to own a home in their early 30s than those who completed their education without taking on as much or any debt. To the extent that the statistical associations we uncovered reflect a causal impact of debt on home ownership, they have important implications for housing market and future spending behavior. Home ownership represents an important means of wealth accumulation, with housing equity being the principal form of wealth households. So changes in the way we finance higher education with an increased reliance on student debt may have an important implication for the housing market and the distribution of wealth. It only took the Fed about 6 years to figure out what was obvious to everyone else. Alas, that does not help solve the core underlying problems discussed above, because the absent a world in which the colleges hand out diplomas to everyone, which will never happen. The gap will only get bigger. And that prediction does not even take into account the fact that U.S. is now about 2 years overdue for a major recession. Article. This is off of Liberty Headlines. No evidence yet produced on Trump campaign collusion with Russia. Swirling in lawmakers meeting behind closed doors, it's not difficult to conclude where the trouble in the Trump White House. Dive reveals that lots of people who would not consider themselves Trump supporters, there is no evidence of any wrongdoing by the Trump campaign regarding alleged collusion with Russians. Here's a list of some of those who fall into the no evidence column. Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California. The last time we spoke, Senator, I asked you if you had actually seen evidence of collusion between Trump campaign and the Russians, and you said to me, I am quoting you now, you said, not at this time. Has anything changed since we spoke last? Asked CNN's Wolf Blitzer. Well, no, it hasn't, Feinstein said. But I just want to be precise, Senator. In all of the You've had access from the Intelligence Committee, from the Judiciary Committee, all the access you've had to every sensitive information. So far, you've not seen any evidence of collusion. Is this right? Blitzer pressed. Well, evidence that would be established that there's no collusion. Or try that again. Well, evidence that would establish that there's collusion. There are all kinds of rumors around. There are newspaper stories, but that's not necessarily evidence, Feinstein admitted. So let's go to Representative Maxine Waters, Democrat of California. But just to be clear, there has been no actual evidence yet, Sam Stein of the Huffington Post asked. No, it has not been, Waters said. Now let's try former CIA Director John Brennan. What I have found appalling is the number of leaks that have taken place over the last several months, Brennan said at the SALT conference in Las Vegas, the annual gathering of hedge-funded managers and other financiers. This needs to be stopped. The damage that was done is what was leaked in the aftermath, what was put in the media. The real damage to our national security is the leaks, Brennan said. Brennan said these individuals who still stay within the government and are leaking this stuff to the press need to be brought to task. So they have no evidence. They have no proof of anything. And yet all the money is being poured into this investigation, and they can't come up with anything. My question is, when are they going to pull the money plug on this foolishness? And let's get on with something important. The next article we have is off of Liberty Headlines. And the hamster's working on it here. Trump stories based on sources admittedly not verified. From Breitbart, it says the common element in nearly all the major New York Times and Washington Post stories about President Donald Trump this week is that they are based on source documents the outlets cannot authenticate, do not possess, admit are partial, and refuse to share. The supposed bombshell story follows the same pattern. The Times reports that Trump told the visiting Russian that former FBI Director James Comey was a nut job, and that firing him had eased pressure in his ability to conduct foreign policy, though the Times takes Trump to mean the legal pressure of the investigation. That spin makes no sense. Firing Comey created more pressure, which was so obvious the Russians joked about it. The Times described a source as a document summarizing the meeting that was circulated. It does not say by whom. The Times does not have an American official, simply read quotations to the Times. The Post story, which reports that the probe into potential ties between Russia and the Trump campaign has reached someone close to the president, cites people familiar with the matter. The story is untrue, but the sources are so flimsy that there's no way to have confidence in what the Post calls its revelation. Earlier this week, the Post reported that the House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, told a meeting of fellow House Republican leaders, "I think Putin says Trump." According to those present, the remark was a joke. The Post source was an audio recording of the conversation, which it did not have in its actual possession, and which it refuses to share with the public so that people can judge for themselves. The Post did publish a transcript, which it does not appear to have produced itself. The transcript actually supports the claim that McCarthy was joking. The Post reporter has insisted that McCarthy meant his remark to be taken seriously, but refuses to provide the audio. Fake news, fake news, fake news. Next we have is off of Liberty Headlines. And the hamster is a running. Paul Craig Roberts, the assault on Trump is unprecedented. Reports here says, we are witnessing an assault by the national security state and its liberal media on a president of the United States that is unprecedented. Wild and unsupported accusations of treasonous or illegal Russian connections have been the mainstay of the news since Trump's campaign for president. These accusations have reached the point that there is an impeachment movement driven by the national security state and its liberal media and endorsed by Democrats. The American left wing, which has turned against the working class as Trump deplorables and luminaries such as Harvard law professor Larry Tribe. The Washington Post, which was not present at the meeting of President Trump with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, purports to know that Trump gave Lavrov U.S. national security information. The Russian government has offered the media a transcript of the meeting, but of course, the prostitutes are not interested. The latest story is that Trump tried to bribe FBI Director Comey before he fired him, not to investigate Trump as part of the Russian investigation. Clearly, there is no intelligence left in America media. The president doesn't need to bribe someone, he can fire. What we are witnessing is the determination of the national security state to keep their prized Russian threat in its assigned role as the #1 threat to the U.S. The liberal media, owned by the CIA since the 1950s, is in accord with this goal. The American media is so accustomed to its enslavement by the national security state that it does not think of the consequences, but Professor Stephen Cohen does. I agree with him that the greatest threat to the national security is the assault on President Trump. Cohen said that there is a fourth branch of government, the intelligence community, which obstructs the management of American foreign affairs by the executive branch in Congress. As an example, he reminded us that in 2016, President Obama worked out a deal with Russian President Putin for military cooperation in Syria. He said he was going to share intelligence with Russia, just like Trump and the Russians were supposed to do the other day. Our Department of Defense said it wouldn't share intelligence. And a few days later, they killed Syrian soldiers, violating the agreement. And that was the end of that. So we can ask, who is making our foreign policy in Washington today? All I have is off BizPack Review. And the hamster is trotting around that wheel. Impeach X, the cure for liberals obsessed with impeachment. Fox News' Greg Gutfield's show unveiled the cure for liberals who have impeaching President Donald Trump on their minds 24/7. Weeks ago, host Greg Gutfield announced his new fictitious sponsor prescription for people like Hillary Clinton who want to blame else for their defeats. I guess it would be pronounced blame it all. Now there's hope for liberals, particularly in the media, who can't stop fantasizing about impeaching the president. Do all of the thoughts in your head lead to only one conclusion? Are you constantly fixated on the same thing? The narrator asked before showing a montage of news anchors talking about impeachment. To end the video, the narrator warned of the side effects of Impeach X, included getting a life and or being alienated by people who constantly want to talk about impeachment. And there is some video in this if you would care to pull it up and watch it. The next one is off of BizPack Review. Hamster's just a flying. It says GOP lawmakers fear for their lives as the left gets more hostile. Republican lawmakers are fearing for their lives, and Democrats are doing a little to quell the flames. In fact, last week we reported that Wendy Wright, an unhinged liberal, chased down Tennessee congressman after town hall meeting. She eventually blocked him from leaving a driveway, screamed at and reached inside toward him and pounded on the car. And then there's a tweet here from someone that many of you who listen to my show probably know. Mary Brown tweeted, Tennessee, hashtag insane woman stalks and accosts a GOP rep after town hall, gets herself arrested by leaving huge breadcrumb trail. But Wright's just one of growing numbers of people who have waged similar threats and attacks against Republicans and conservatives. Others include the FBI arrest of man threatening the life of Representative Martha McSally, a Republican from Arizona, and heightened security initiated by Representative Tom Garrett after the Virginia Republicans received death threats, according to The Hill. GOP lawmakers who haven't felt physically endangered nonetheless report being shouted down at normally staid and civil town hall events by belligerent crowds. At the core of the rancor and unrest are the very policies upon which President Trump campaigned and was elected, and Clinton supporters refused to let it go. But now it seems to be going way beyond Trump, with protesters looking for any excuse to disrupt a meeting. Representative David Bratt described being shouted down at an event after he mentioned everyone's God-given rights. They booed God, they booed pastors, they booed prayer, they booed the name of the church, they booed when I said rights come from God, told The Hill. That's a fundamental tenet of Western civilization. I mean, I didn't think that was partisan. Coastline GOP Representative Tom MacArthur was also shouted down by his New Jersey audience of mentioning his deceased 11-year-old daughter. Folks on social media thought the behavior typical coming from the left and encouraged Republicans to keep up the fight. Tweets to go along with that. It says, and one believed it all began with so-called apology tour that up a little bit here. Well, slipped up a lot, I guess. Try that again. Here we go. And one believed it all began with the so-called apology tour that marked the beginning of President Obama's presidency. The discord has also resulted in vandalism and attacks on staff, as Representative Todd Yoho reported, or Yoho, I'm not sure how he pronounces his name. And they're mad to the point where they're cussing at my staff, pushing one of them, poured stuff on one of the staff's cars, the Florida Republican told The Hill. They start acting responsible and respectable, we'll do the same. Next article is off of Breitbart. And the hamster's just a-flying. Ending Obamacare subsidies. According to a Politico report, President Donald Trump told advisors that he favors ending Obamacare subsidies to bring Democrats to the negotiating table for a more comprehensive deal on repeal. Trump said that ending the Obamacare subsidies will force Democrats to negotiate on an Obamacare replacement. Some White House advisors worry that the backfire politically if Americans lose health insurance or if people experience spikes in insurance costs. Health insurers have pressed President Trump for months on clarity on whether the White House will provide subsidies estimated at $7 billion. The Obamacare subsidies go to insurers, reduce deductibles and other costs for low-income consumers. Previously expressed his desire to end the Obamacare subsidies. In April, the president said Obamacare is dead next month if it doesn't get that money. He continued, I haven't made my viewpoint clear yet. I don't want people to get hurt. What I think should happen and will happen is the Democrats will start calling me and negotiating. Health Secretary Tom Price remains cautious about eliminating the healthcare subsidies. Price argues that doing so would discourage insurers from participating in the Obamacare exchange and might destabilize an already crumbling Obamacare exchange market. Conservatives argue that Obama lacked the authority and that Obama lacked the authority to dole out billions of dollars of insurance subsidies, arguing that Congress never appropriated money for that purpose. Under former Speaker John Boehner, House Republicans sued the Obama administration to prevent it from doling out the subsidies. In 2016, a federal judge ruled against the Obama administration, but allowed the Obama White House to continue providing Obamacare subsidies while the administration appealed the decision. Republicans sought to delay the court case after Trump was elected president. The president will have to inform the U.S. Court of Appeals how he wants to resolve the House Republicans' lawsuit. The White House can also ask for a 90-day hold on the lawsuit. In a statement, the White House told Congress it will consider the payments through May. However, the administration has not made any commitments beyond that. The statement read, no final decisions have been made at this time, and all options are on the table. After the American Health Care Act failed to garner enough votes in the House, Trump tweeted that Democrats will come around to make a deal with him once Obamacare implodes. And he puts out a tweet, says, the Democrats will make a deal with me on health care as soon as Obamacare folds. Not long. Do not worry. We are in very good shape. The next article is off of Gateway Pundit. It says, Thursday's deep state leak proves Obama was spying on the Trump campaign. Deep State leaked more top-secret information on Thursday to Rutgers in their continued attempt to destroy the Trump administration. Deep State officials leaked classified materials that proves Obama administration was spying on the Trump campaign. Material leaked to Rutgers by anonymous intelligence officials inside the government shows that Trump campaign officials had 18 contacts. When will Attorney General Sessions appoint a special counsel to investigate Obama's criminal surveillance of political foes? Speaking to the Russians or Egyptians or Argentinians on the phone is not a crime. Listening in on your political opponent's calls is a crime. Rutgers reports Michael Flynn and other advisors to Donald Trump campaign were in contact with Russian officials and others with Kremlin ties, at least 18 calls and emails during the last 7 months of the 2016 presidential race. Current and former U.S. officials familiar with the exchange told Reuters the previously undisclosed interactions form part of the record now being reviewed by the FBI and congressional investigators probing Russian interference in the U.S. presidential election and contacts between Trump's campaign and Russia. 6 of the previously undisclosed contacts described to Reuters were phone calls between Sergei Kislyak, Russian ambassador to the United States, and Trump's advisor, including Flynn. Trump's first national security advisor, 3 current and former officials said. Conversations between Flynn and Kislyak accelerated after the November 8th vote, as the two discussed establishing a back channel for communications between Trump and Russia, President Vladimir Putin, that could bypass the U.S. national security bureaucracy, which both sides considered hostile to improved relations, 4 current U.S. officials said. And the next article here is off of Liberty Headlines. It says, lawsuit threatens to destroy the DNC for election rigging. This seems like an important case. Attorney Cullen O'Brien implored the apathetic American corporate press discussing a class action lawsuit against the Democratic National Committee with LiveZette this week as important as you can get. If you aren't familiar with the lawsuit in question, blame the mainstream and the corporations responsible for their organizations, who are apparently otherwise preoccupied regurgitating unconfirmed, flimsy reports from unnamed officials declaring President Trump as a de facto enemy of the state for sharing classified information on Daesh with the Russians, just as his predecessor did last year. But the mainstream press has effected a total blackout. To wit, Jared Beck, lead attorney in the case, lamented the mainstream media blackout and told redacted tonight's Lee Camp the same outlets plastered headlines during the case of O.J. Simpson, Casey Anthony, and George Zimmerman. A logical comparison, given the potential for suit to shred the Democrat establishment. Attorneys for supporters of the Bernie Sanders in 2016 election brought the class action suit against the former DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the DNC over allegations of fraud, a case strongly supported in communications between the campaign of Hillary Clinton and officials with the Democrat organization. Schultz stands accused, per the complaint, of intentional, willful, wanton, and malicious conduct for violating the DNC charter, whose Article 5, Section 4 states the chair must exercise impartiality and even-handedness as between the presidential candidates and the campaigns. Fraud is only one example of misbehaviors 150 donors to the DNC and Sanders campaign allege occurred throughout the election season. And attorneys say all the evidence necessary can be found in authenticated documents published by WikiLeaks. We are bringing fraud claims on behalf of those who paid money to the Bernie Sanders campaign, believing that they were participating in a fair and impartial political process, Beck told Camp. And that turned out not to be the case, as WikiLeaks and Lucifer 2.0 documents show us beyond dispute. But the DNC bit back, pompously arguing its character does not hold weight of contractual obligations. Thus, the organization remains unbeholden to follow its own rules. It is not a situation where a promise has been made that an enforceable promise, contended Bruce Spivia, lawyer for the DNC, according to transcripts of court proceedings. We could have voluntarily decided that, look, we're going to go into back rooms like they used to and smoke cigars and pick the candidates that way. Spivia and others, Spivia and other defense counsel justifying the astonishing scale of unethical behavior by Schultz and the DNC as adhering to the rules dismiss the gargantuan elephant in the room. Legality in no way equates morality. nor does proffering such an argument do anything to mend the deep and bitter ravine cleaved by the DNC for cold shouldering millions of Bernie Sanders supporters when it instead proved obstinate fidelity to Hillary Clinton's candidacy. But the law might not stand with DNC. Parties to the lawsuit, LifeSet reports, also accuse the DNC and its chairwoman, Wasserman Schultz, of negligent misrepresentation, violation of local District of Columbia law, unjust enrichment, breach of fiduciary duty, and negligence for failing to use and exercise reasonable and due care in obtaining, retaining, and securing personnel and financial information provided to them by people who donate to the committee. On April 25th, DNC attorneys filed a second motion to dismiss the lawsuit, which is currently pending and is the latest obstacle before the discovery process, when evidence primarily from the private communication in documents and emails will be presented. Beck told the Redacted Tonight host, there can be no reconciliation because or try this again, there can be no reconciliation between the victim and the defendant, the perpetuator of frauds, until there has been justice. Honestly, if the Democratic Party is seeking unity in a bona fide manner, then it also needs, I believe, as part of that mission, has to come to terms with the fact that the people that we represent demand and need justice for what happened. Support, however, could be difficult to garner under the oppressive silence on the lawsuit, particularly as it extends well beyond traditional media. The media blackout of the case has been so extreme, LifeSet continues, that a Tuesday search in Google News for lead plaintiff Carol Wilding and DNC produced just one article. Not one article in the past month or year, but one article total, a May 13th piece on liberal progressive website Salon. The DNC's elephant in the room, Dems have a problem. It's not Donald Trump. As a result, on Google News for the same case, in quotes, Wilding versus DNC yields 0 results. A search of the official name of the case, Wilding et al. V. DNC, results Salon and a handful of obscure websites, no mainstream outlets with national or in Florida where the suit was filed. Of course, the silencing of publicity over the lawsuit by the bulk of corporate hardly comes as a shock, revealed in documents published by WikiLeaks was unabashed collusion between mainstream media and both the DNC and Clinton campaign. Impartial, or at least uninfluenced, reporting fell by the wayside in the clamor to install Clinton at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Party Democrats remain unfazed, if also petulant. Newsweek reports Newsweek reports Scott Bolden, a Democratic strategist and former chair of the DNC Democratic Party, who likened the critical lawsuit to a mere frivolity at this juncture prior to midterm and 2020 elections, asserted there should be no anonymity against the real opponent, the administration of Donald Trump, as well as the GOP. The DNC is not as dangerous as Donald Trump is, Bolden told Newsweek on Wednesday. Sanders supporters are forceful, they're vocal, but they haven't learned how to win yet. The importance of the DNC fraud lawsuit is that it shows they're trying to change the rules and regulations and the leadership of the DNC so they can win in upcoming elections. For proponents of the lawsuit and former supporters of the Sanders campaign, however, dismissing that the DNC played bait and switch last year cannot be unanswered, lest the cleft become unbridgeable. What if Apple went into court of law and said, we actually don't believe we have any enforceable obligations to our shareholders? Beck rhetorically queried during a recent interview. What do you think would happen to the Apple stock price? Party insiders, inexplicably ignoring the depth of pain experienced by the duped Democratic voters, find that point moot. Rather than harpoon punitive past transgressions, Bolden observed, it would be in the party's better interest to engage effective campaigns to oust the Trump administration and the Republican-led Congress in upcoming elections. I think the Democrats are still trying to win support from Sanders supporters, and whether they have been successful to date is still an open question, Bolden opted. You still have this lawsuit. You still have progressive factions who believe they and Sanders were wronged by the DNC. But at the end of the day, you can't prove you didn't get enough votes to beat Hillary because of the committee's actions. What you can do is move forward together, which is something DNC Chair Tom Perez and Sanders will have to continue to fight for. The next article is off of BizPack Review. This is the final one for the day. As soon as the hamster gets here up here for me. Ted Nugent says, to what I'd be willing to do to make this country great again, including Robert Ted Nugent is willing to use a concert stage or a political office to make positive differences in serving his country. Self-described Hellraiser, the legendary guitarist and singer, did not rule out the possible run for office as he addressed rumors that he was considering a bid for Congress in 2018. Well, I'm a terminal, we the people, American patriot, and I think I'm doing the most important political job in the world, and that is participating in the sacred experiment of self-government and institutional accountability from our elected employees, he said on Fox News Channel's Fox and Friends on Friday. There's no limit to what I'd be willing to do to help make this country great, he added. The Michigan native said he has been talking with his Republican friends about a possible U.S. Senate run state. I'm a hellraiser. I'm what the founding fathers wanted all Americans to be, he said, pointing out that we now have a hellraiser in the White House as well. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, 10 Commandments, the Golden Rule, being the best that you can be, earning your way, he continued, adding sarcastically, wow, I'm a radical. Nugent, who has performed over 65,000 concerts, or try that again, 6,500 concerts, and released over 30 albums in his prolific rock career, is proud of President Trump and thinks he needs to focus on what out to do in the White House. He needs to stay on course. America first, make America great again, job security, secure the borders. It's so simple. Even guitar players can figure this stuff out, he said. If you're not pissing off the idiots, you are an idiot, Nugent said, referring to Trump's critics. He's not an idiot. He's driving the idiots crazy, so I'm proud of him. That in his talks with working hard, playing hard Americans, he has found that they are behind the president and voted for him to make a difference. They like everything about status quo, crushing crowbar of Donald Trump. That's why we voted for him, he said, explaining that middle America finally has representation in Washington, D.C. The 69-year-old revealed that the president was down to earth when he met him on a recent visit to the White House, along with former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin and fellow musician Kid Rock. He cared what we thought, and he was genuinely interested in what real Americans think, Nugent said. That's all I have for you this morning. If you like what I'm doing, give it a thumbs up so everybody gets to hear the news. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.